In part 1 of this project, we explored the angel faith as a religion, its symbols, its clergy, its sacred spaces, and the prophecy at its center. But to understand how Deltarune actually illustrates religious and philosophical ideas, you have to understand what happens in the story, specifically what happens when the religion stops being background detail and becomes the entire point. Deltarune is set in Hometown, a quiet community populated by monsters, where humans are rare. The player controls Chris, a teenage human who lives with their mother Toriel, a school teacher and a former choir singer. Their father Asgore still comes to church at night to pray, even though he and Toriel are separated. Their older brother Azrael is away at college. On the surface, this is just a family, a slightly broken one, but ordinary in most ways. The story begins when Chris and their abrasive classmate Susie fall through a supply closet into what the game calls the Dark World, an alternative reality of shadow and magic that exists beneath the surface of the normal world. There, they meet Ralse, a soft-spoken prince from the darkness who delivers a prophecy. 3 heroes, a human, a monster, and a prince from the dark, are destined to seal the fountains and banish the angels' heaven. The prophecy has been foretold, Ralse says, by time and space. The heroes did not choose this role, they are told they already have it. Chapter 1 and 2 play out across a card kingdom and a neon cyber world, each containing a dark fountain that Chris must seal. But the game keeps undercutting its own heroic framework. At the end of each chapter, Chris tears something out of their chest, a small glowing heart, the soul, which the game uses as a symbol of the player's control over Chris, and throws it away. The implication is deeply unsettling. Throughout their entire adventure, Chris may have not even been acting freely, and at the end of chapter 2, in the middle of the night, Chris picks up a knife, drives it into the floor, and opens a new dark fountain, deliberately, as if following a plan the player was never told about. Chapter 3 picks up immediately. Chris has created a dark fountain in their own living room, and when morning comes, they and Susie wake up inside a TV world, a dark dimension shaped by the emotional memory of Toriel's old television set, now incarnated as a game show host named Tenna. Tenna is manic and sad in equal measure. He refuses to let the heroes seal the fountain, not because he wants to destroy the world, but because he's afraid of being abandoned, afraid of what it means to be turned off, set aside, become obsolete. He forces the group through bizarre game show trials, and for a moment, the story looks like it will give him a resolution. It does not. Before anything can be settled, a mysterious armored figure called the Roaring Knight appears and destroys Tenna entirely. The knight does not speak. It does not explain itself. It simply ends what was happening and walks away through a door. The heroes seal the fountain and return to the light world, shaken, unable to process what happened. In the light world, life continues almost normally. Toriel's TV is broken beyond repair. She invites Susie to church. Chris and Susie spend the day investigating a shelter they've heard about, talking to neighbors, reconnecting with their friend Noelle. Evening comes. They go back to the church to find Toriel. They open the doors and the church is full of dark mist. Chapter 4 is subtitled Prophecy, and the subtitle earns itself completely. The church, the building where Hometown's community is gathered for services, sung hymns, lit candles, and listen to Father Alvin's sermons, now contains an entire dark world. Not beside it, inside it. The knight has driven a fountain into the church itself. When Chris and Susie enter, they briefly see the knight and give chase, but fail to catch it. They fall through the dark architecture of what the game calls the Dark Sanctuary, and when they land, they are surrounded by stained glass tapestries, enormous glowing panels depicting the full text of the prophecy in fragments, each one illuminating suddenly as the heroes approach, each one darker than the last. The prophecy, read in pieces across the sanctuary, is not the reassuring scripture it might have seemed. It describes light and dark in balance, then a shattering of harmony, a sky that runs black, a land that cracks with fear, and the earth drawing its final breath. Then, the heroes arrive, and they seal the fountains. They banish the angels' heaven. That is how the story is supposed to end. But deeper in the sanctuary, there is something else. A final stained glass panel that does not show a hero or a symbol. It shows the angel. Susie looks at it. Rouse tells her that that is what the angel actually looks like. Susie does not say much. The game's narrator says, "Looking at it made you feel strange. You did not investigate further." Throughout the sanctuary, the heroes are mentored by an old man, who turns out to be something stranger than he appeared. The Darkener formed from the ashes of Gerson Boom, Father Alvin's late father, a renowned teacher, author, and craftsman, whose remains were kept in a glass case in his son's office. The dark world brought him back, shaped by memory and grief. When Susie delivers a letter from him to Father Alvin at the chapter's end, it is one of the most quietly devastating moments the game has produced. A message from a dead father delivered through a door between worlds. The chapter ends with a confrontation. The knight drives another fountain into the heart of the third sanctuary, and from it emerges a titan, a massive dark being described in the prophecy as a harbinger of the roaring. The apocalypse the fountain opening causes. The heroes climb it and fight it, and in the climax, Susie throws Chris inside the titan, where the soul, the player's own symbol, destroys it from within. When Chris returns to the light world and falls asleep, the game does what it has always done at the end of every chapter. Chris removes the soul, the player is expelled again, and Chris, alone, presumably continues doing whatever it is they've been doing in the dark, whatever plan unfolding that the game has not named yet. Deltarune was developed by Toby Fox, who created the acclaimed 2015 indie game Undertale, and the reception to each chapter's release has reflected how seriously the gaming world takes him as a creator. Chapter 1 was released in October 2018 as a free download with almost no prior marketing. He simply posted it to his website. Despite this, it reached over 1 million downloads within days, driven entirely by the fan base from Undertale. Critics praised the chapter's emotional writing, its inventive combat system, and most of all its score, which Toby Fox composed alone. The chapter was short, but it generated immediate and sustained conversation about what kind of story he was building. Chapter 1 and 2 were released together in September 2021, again free, and the response was extraordinary. The game drew around 100,000 concurrent players on Steam at launch, a record that far exceeded Undertale's lifetime peak. IGN rated the release highly, calling the story emotionally rich and praising its willingness to challenge player expectations. GameSpot commended its blend of comedy, melancholy, and philosophical weight. Nintendo Life called it exceptional across the board. On Metacritic, the game maintained scores in the upper 80s to low 90s. Chapters 3 and 4 were released on June 4th and 5th, 2025 as a paid release, the first time Toby Fox charged for the game, and simultaneously as a launch title for the Nintendo Switch 2. The commercial response is immediate. Deltarune was among the highest grossing games on Steam in terms of revenue in its release window, and it became the best-selling digital game on the Switch 2 at launch, outselling first-party Nintendo titles. At the 2025 Golden Joystick Awards, it was nominated for Best Indie Game and Best Soundtrack. It was awarded Best Game at the 2025 Game Maker Awards. Critics responding to Chapters 3 and 4 found them emotionally heavier and thematically bolder than their predecessors. Pocket Tactics described the end of Chapter 4 as producing a sort of beautiful horror, a combination of music, lore, and visuals that they said no other game had produced in quite the same way. Checkpoint Gaming praised the new emotional depth of the character work, noting in particular that Susie's arc across the new chapters was powerful enough to bring players to tears. Reviewers also noted that Chapter 3 was slightly slower paced, which some found meandering, but that Chapter 4's payoff justified the build-up entirely. The cultural footprint of Deltarune is significant and somewhat unusual. Toby Fox's music has been performed by professional orchestras, covered by musicians across genres, and analyzed in videos that have accumulated millions of views. The game's community produces tens of thousands of fan artworks, essay-length analyses, and animated interpretations. What distinguishes this response from the reception of other popular games is the nature of the conversation it generates. Deltarune's audience is most interested in its philosophical dimensions, the question of free will, the meaning of the soul, and the religious imagery of the angel and the prophecy. This is a game that people will treat as text to be interpreted, not just an experience to be had. In part 1 of this project, we established that Deltarune contains what we can legitimately call a religion, the angel faith, complete with sacred symbols, a clergy, a sacred space, community worship, and a prophetic tradition. Now we need to go further, because what Chapters 3 and 4 reveal is that the game is not just depicting a religion. It is asking hard questions about what religion actually does, what it conceals, and what it might mean when the thing your faith has been pointing towards finally appears. Let me start with a concept introduced by the religious scholar Mircea Eliade, the idea of the hierophany, which simply means a manifestation of the sacred. A moment when something holy breaks into ordinary space. For Eliade, a church is already a hierophanic space. It is a place set apart from the ordinary world, marked as sacred, where believers approach something greater than themselves. The church in Hometown functions exactly this way. The DELTARUNE is carved on it. Father Alvin leads services inside it. Families gather there on Sundays. It is, in every recognizable sense, a house of worship. But Deltarune takes Eliade's concept and makes it literal. Chapter 4 does not just use the church as a setting. It reveals that the church is built directly on top of a sacred reality. The dark sanctuary exists beneath it. The prophecy is written in stained glass inside it. The dark fountain, the very mechanism of the apocalypse the community's religion describes, erupts within its walls. Eliade wrote that the sacred always contains the potential to overwhelm ordinary life. Deltarune turns that metaphor into an event. The sacred breaks through the floor of the church and floods the building with darkness. This is where the scholar or devotee distinction becomes essential. If you are a devotee, a practicing believer in hometown, your experience of the angel is one of warmth and community. You hear Caddy give a cheerful, somewhat chaotic reading of the prophecy at Sunday service, stumbling through the words with enthusiasm but not quite grasping the weight of them. You sing hymns, you light candles. The angel, in this lived space, is a guardian, present, watchful, and benevolent. But if you are a scholar, if you read the prophecy carefully, the picture is different. The prophecy does not describe the angel as a protector. It describes the angel's heaven as something the heroes must banish. The text itself says that if the fountains are opened, the sky will run black and the land will crack with fear. The angel's arrival is the catastrophe. The hero's job is to prevent it. This is one of the oldest and most persistent tensions in religious history. The same divine figure that one group worships as a source of comfort and protection is identified by another reading of the same tradition as a figure of overwhelming, potentially destructive power. The God of the Hebrew Bible is both the voice that comforts Abraham and the consuming fire at Sinai. The Hindu figure of Kali is both a destroyer and a protector, depending on whom you ask and what text you read. Deltarune is playing in this tradition intentionally. The angel is not simply good or simply threatening. It is holy, which is to say, it is real, it is powerful, and it does not fit cleanly into human moral categories. The most striking moment in this dimension of the game is the hidden stained glass panel in the third sanctuary. Throughout the Dark Sanctuary, the tapestries have depicted the prophecy in the game's minimalist pixel style. Simple figures, clear images. But one panel, tucked in a hidden room, shows what the angel actually looks like. Susie sees it. Rouse confirms that that is what the angel genuinely looks like. And then the narrator says, "Looking at it made you feel strange. You did not investigate further." We never see what it looks like, neither does the player. What Toby Fox has done here, withholding the image at the exact moment of revelation, is remarkably consistent with how many religious traditions understand the divine. Though, it could be a commentary on how maybe the player is the angel. You're meant to see your reflection. In Jewish tradition, the name of God is too sacred to be spoken aloud. In Islam, visual representations of the divine are prohibited. In Christian mysticism, the ultimate encounter with God is often described as blinding, beyond language, beyond image. The angel cannot be shown because showing it would diminish it. What Susie's horrified silence communicates is something more powerful than any image could. This thing is real, and it is beyond anything the church upstairs was actually prepared for. This connects to a concept developed by the religious scholar Rudolf Otto, the numinous, which he described as a presence that is simultaneously terrifying and fascinating, what he called in Latin the mysterium tremendum et fascines, the mystery that overwhelms and compels at the same time. An encounter with the numinous is not comfortable, it is not safe. It produces awe in the oldest and most incomplete sense of the word, wonder and dread together. The Angel of Deltarune is a numinous figure. The community worships it from a comfortable distance, through ritual and symbol. The heroes encounter it at the end of the prophecy, in stained glass, and cannot look directly at what it actually is. There is one more moment in Chapter 4 that deserves specific attention, because it may be the most honest religious statement the game makes. Near the end of the third sanctuary, the prophecy continues the point of the hero's victory, past the sealing of the fountains, past the banishing of the angel's heaven, and it describes something else, a final tragedy. The text says there will only be one way to save the worlds, that some terrible final event is required, and that only then everything will be saved. Susie smashes the panel before the heroes can read it. She has heard enough. She does not want to know how this ends, and in that moment she is doing something that the people of faith have always done when their tradition's texts become too demanding, too dark, too costly. She turns away. She chooses not to know. And this is not cowardice on the game's part. it is honesty. Most practitioners of any religion do not sit with the full weight of what their tradition actually claims. They participate in what is livable. The unfaceable parts of the scripture remain unfaced. Susie's refusal is not a failure of faith. It is a very human response to the possibility that the truth is more than you bargained for. What Deltarune ultimately illustrates is that religion is not just about belief. It is about the relationship between a community and a truth that is larger than them. A truth that they are moving towards, even if they do not fully understand what it is. Hometown's church is real. The worship inside it is sincere. Asgore really does go there at night to pray for his broken family. That is not a performance. But beneath the church, the full reality of what the community has been oriented towards is waiting. Vast, prophesied, terrifying, and still not fully revealed. The devotees above have built something that true without quite knowing what it points towards. The scholars below are learning more than they wanted to know. And the angel, whatever it actually is, has not arrived.